Hey, all. Thanks so much, Todd. That was a very kind introduction. I really appreciate it. And hi to everybody joining us today. I'm calling in from Austin, Texas. So really excited to be here today to chat with all of you from all over the world. And yeah, I'm just going to jump right in. So as Todd said, my name is Yuraima Estevez. I am an engineering manager over at the New York Times. And Todd did a great job of giving you a little bit of background for why I'm here today, but I'm gonna just give a little bit more context to set the scene a bit. A few years ago, I created an open source project, a tool that I called Chronicler. And when I was first starting off, I had no idea how to actually go about open sourcing it. Probably feels very familiar to most of us here today. And I can say very confidently that that's a totally natural feeling. I myself was very lost. So in order to figure out how I could put my project out into the world, I went ahead and I Googled. Probably something that all of you are very familiar with, certainly something that I do every day. I went ahead and I Googled, how can I make a great open source project? And after a little bit of research, I put a bunch of disparate pieces together for how I could successfully put my project out into the world. And after I finally got it all together and pushed it all up to GitHub, I decided to write about my experience open sourcing my first project. And I ended up coming out with a blog post titled How to Take Your Open Source Project from Good to Great. This is the one that Todd was alluding to, and the one that the link was shared in the chat. It's a beginner's guide for how you can create a great open source project. All of it is based on my own research, conversations with my colleagues and friends, and generally just my experience at the time, both using different open source projects and throughout the process of figuring out how I can make my own project great. Now, that was published back in 2019. And looking back on it now, on March 30th, 2021, that was approximately 1,000 years ago. And truthfully, a lot of what I wrote still holds up. So I definitely encourage you to go read it, especially if you want to take a look at some of the resources that I have available and any other quick tips that might be helpful for you as you go along your journey. The general takeaway for my blog post is that there are a lot of ways that you can take your open source project from good to great. I wrote about a few that I thought were important, and today, no doubt, you're going to learn plenty more ways that you can take your open source project to the next level in the sessions later on. But for this session, I want to focus on something that was missing from that blog post. Focus on something that I've been learning more and more of over the last few years of my career, and something that I somehow always come back to as one of the most important things that I do in my work day to day. One of the absolute most impactful ways that you can take your open source project from good to great is to focus on community. Community is the heart of open source. It's what drives us to volunteer our time and our energy to projects that can be used by thousands more. It prompts us to become better teachers and enables us to always learn new things. It's honestly what brings us here together today at an online conference. Without a strong sense of community, there would be no Open Source 101 conference. And without the thousands of communities out there today, there would be no open source at all. Just like I said in my original blog post, there are a lot of ways that you can focus on community while open sourcing your work. Today, I'm really just going to focus on a few quick tactical tips that I've picked up along the way. And they're going to center around being welcoming, being inclusive, helping others to learn, and helping others to contribute. And again, these are just the 4 cornerstones that I'm going to focus on today to get you started on thinking about how you can build a community around your own open source projects. But there are actually a few other sessions later on that will focus more deeply on community. So I highly encourage you to check those out. So to start it off, let's talk about being welcoming. We want our community to be open and welcoming, and this is going to help newcomers feel at home and contributors keep coming back to continue helping your cause. First impressions, honestly, they are pretty long lasting. So do everything that you can to make folks feel welcome when they first discover your project. One of the best places to do this is probably your README file. It's the first page your users will see, and it usually houses a ton of important information, so they're going to be there anyway. If you address your users and your contributors in your README file, it's one small step that goes a really long way in creating a sense of belonging. You can add your motivations for the project in your README. You can describe who the project serves and add any values or principles that help guide you as you work towards your ultimate goal. This can give your community something to come together on, and it helps motivate everyone to keep making progress forward together. Your README is also a great place to express gratitude. You can thank newcomers for coming to visit in the first place, and you can show some love to the different contributors that help make your project everything that it is. The all contributor spec and the supporting tools around it makes it really easy to celebrate all kinds of contributors for their help. And this even goes beyond engineering support. It includes recognition for translations, bug filing, documentation writing, design help, and a lot of other contribution types. You can also just add some names to an author's markdown file. The open source Sinatra has a really great example in their author's file. They personally and very specifically thank many of the project's main contributors. If your project is small enough, you can definitely find ways to personally thank your contributors. But even as it grows, don't forget to give thanks to the folks that help keep your project and community going. Making people feel welcome and valued is a key part to a strong sense of community. There are simple ways to accomplish this, like the ones that I shared here, but don't be afraid to put your own spin on a welcome wagon committee that's maybe right for your project. Could be anything. The next pillar of a great community is inclusivity. You want to emphasize the importance of kindness and mutual respect in all aspects of what community members do. And again, you want this to be in your README file or somewhere equally prominent. Be as intentional and thoughtful about the culture you're trying to build. Good culture does not happen by accident. You need to cultivate it and nurture it into what you want it to be. Make sure you're being specific about how best to give feedback in code review, or how to keep discussions cordial and productive. A code of conduct helps to reinforce the culture that you're trying to build. And it's one small part of creating a space that is safe and welcoming for all people. Now, I found this tweet last night from Josh Simmons, and he's giving the talk right after me. Hey, Josh. I found it and I was like, well, I got to put this in my talk. And the tweet is, your community is only as good as the worst behavior it tolerates. And it's so accurate that I absolutely needed to share it. Your code of conduct will make it very clear what kind of behavior is expected and what kind of behavior is absolutely not tolerated when participating in your community. It's an extension of your open source and community values and the principles, and you should use it to help protect your community from harm. If you need some inspiration for codes of conduct to adopt, here's one. The Contributor Covenant is a really well-respected and frequently adopted code of conduct that you can make your own. So please check it out if you ever feel stuck on what direction to take your code of conduct in. Or you can pull inspiration from existing organizations and their codes of conduct, like the one that Open Source 101 has. Make sure that you're recognizing and celebrating the fact that your community is made up of people from all walks of life. It's better for it. It's stronger for it. People from different backgrounds, experience levels, race, ethnicities, religions, nationalities, all coming together to work on a project that means something to you all and binds you all together. Having a diverse community, again, doesn't come for free and it doesn't happen by accident. And honestly, it's no secret that the tech and open source fields have been particularly toxic for folks belonging to minority and marginalized groups. So make sure you're putting in the work to make your community one that is safe and welcoming for everyone, especially those that have been historically left out. Now, I want to add a really quick note here because I think it's so important to get this point across. The dual topics of diversity and inclusion are a whole talk, a course, a profession in and of itself. It's one that demands and deserves thoughtful and intentional. I add it here quickly, not to thinking that this is a quick tip to add to your checklist, but to underscore the importance of it and urge you to give it the time and focus it needs. A sense of belonging in your community can really distinguish you from the many other projects a user or contributor can spend their time on. So take this to heart and commit to making your community experiences feel open, safe, and supportive. No matter what your experience level, if you're brand new to programming or you have years of experience under your belt, everyone is going to need a little extra help at some point. And having a supportive learning environment is going to attract folks from all different levels and enable them to grow along with your project. Documentation can make or break your project. So take extra care to write documentation that is accessible, understandable, and easy to discover. Besides your README file, and maybe besides a documentation site, consider creating tutorials, walkthroughs, examples. These will all really help people learn both quickly and deeply. And remember, there is a person at the other end of your documentation. You can help them succeed in learning by keeping your docs up to date and as helpful as possible. You also want to set up channels of communication where people can come together and ask questions and learn from each other. Things like Slack, Discord, and IRC channels are perfect for these kinds of asynchronous conversations. But also consider things like video calls or conference calls to bring community members together in real life. These can be open office hours to ask questions, they can be meetups to learn new topics, or really just time to come together and discuss the future of the project. This is me back in 2018 when I first published Chronicler. You probably can't recognize me because of all the hair, but I promise that's me. When I first published it, I decided to speak at a conference or at a meetup that the New York Times was hosting. I shared my Chronicler experiences with the group, and I explained how they could help by contributing code to the project. And I also encouraged them to reach out online or in person if they ever needed any help. Taking a personal approach really helps to build a human connection, and it helps your project and your community to go way beyond just the code. Building a culture of learning in your community helps bring people together and create strong human connections. There's plenty that you can do to help your users and your contributors become more fluent and confident in your particular project. So always be on the lookout for how you can enable your community to do their best work. The last pillar of your great open source community is making sure you're helping others contribute to your project. You want to make it super easy for folks to participate in your community, to encourage them to do so, and to get started very quickly. Make sure that you have a contributing doc. This is going to tell folks how they can get started, where they can jump in, and how they can reach out for help. Honestly, it can be pretty intimidating for a newcomer to land on a project that they're really excited to participate in and have absolutely no idea where to start. I'm sure many of us here today have felt that at some point or another, or will feel that in the future. So try to make a habit of labeling different issues based on how difficult they might be to tackle, and make it especially clear when a task would be suited best for beginners. You can see here on the React code base, they have a label specifically for all open issues that are approachable and easy enough for beginners to take on. You'll see it under the green label called Good First Issue. This kind of labeling really helps encourage new contributors to submit their own work and helps to grow your community at all different levels. Again, a personal touch can really go a long way. Pairing closely with contributors and helping them to fix bugs or getting them to take on bigger projects can really help build up a lot of confidence in them in a short amount of time. And lastly, it takes a village to keep a great open source project, especially one with a vibrant community. Find ways to bring more people into the fold. This could be by inviting frequent contributors to join you as maintainers, and then mentoring them to take on more and more responsibilities. Maintaining your open source project will not always be easy, and it'll be especially hard in the beginning when you're first starting off on your own. So the faster you can get folks to contribute, the easier it's going to be to share the responsibility of maintaining a great project. As I said at the top of this talk, there are a ton of ways for you to take your open source project from good to great. Focusing on community is just one of them, but I think it's one of the most important and valuable ones that you can spend your time on. Ultimately, building a great community comes down to keeping people at the center of your work. Whether you're writing documentation, hosting meetups, building up processes around code review, or setting up continuous integration pipelines. Think about how best to serve the people in your community. If you do this and take it to heart, you'll almost certainly take your open source project from good to great. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for being here today, and to the Open Source 101 organizers for everything they've done. Feel free to ask questions using the Q&A feature. I'll be around for the rest of the day to answer questions, hang out. And if you want to find me on Twitter, my handle is @Yuraim04. You can send questions my way or just funny memes. And if anyone wants to take a look at the slides that I used here today, you can go to my website, opensource101.yuraima.com. Thank you.